Jenna Paone. Welcome to Lit Chick on a Mighty Blaze. I am so thrilled to welcome beach read queen, royalty, legend, icon, Mary Kay Andrews today. Mary Kay, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Jenna. Great to be here.
Oh, we're so excited. We're celebrating the release of your latest book, The Newcomer, and this is a very special anniversary for you. This marks 3 decades of nonstop writing and publishing, which is a truly extraordinary feat. I don't know if folks realize how difficult it is to not just write a book a year, but to do that for 30 years. So claps and hats off and snaps and all of the champagne to you, because that's truly an incredible feat.
Thank you.
We're going to kick things off by, I'm just going to introduce you for anyone, if there is anyone out there who doesn't, know your life story yet, which I'm sure everyone watching is a fan already, but just so they know how awesome you are. Mary Kay Andrews is the New York Times bestselling author of 27 novels, including Hello Summer, Sunset Beach, The High Tide Club, The Weekenders, Beach Town, Save the Date, Ladies Night, Christmas Bliss, Spring Fever, Summer Rental, The Fixer-Upper, Deep Dish, Blue Christmas, Savannah Breeze, Hissy Fit, Little Bitty Lies, and Savannah Blues, and one cookbook, The Beach House Cookbook. A native of St. Petersburg, Florida, she earned a BA in journalism from the University of Georgia. After a 14-year career working as a reporter at newspapers, including the Savannah Morning News, the Marietta Journal, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, where she spent the final 10 years of her career, she left journalism in 1991 to write fiction. Her first novel, Every Crooked Nanny, was published in 1992 by Harper Collins. She went on to write 10 critically acclaimed mysteries under her real name, Kathy Hogan Trocheck. Sorry. Tongue twister, that real name of yours.
That's why I changed it to Andrews. It's so much easier.
And in 2002, she assumed the pen name Mary Kay Andrews with the publication of Savannah Blues. In 2006, Hissy Fit became her first New York Times bestseller, followed by 12 more New York Times, USA Today, and Publishers Weekly bestsellers. To date, her novels have been published in German, Italian, Polish, Slovenian, Hungarian, Dutch, Czech, and Japanese. She and her family divide their time between Atlanta and Tybee Island, Georgia, where they cook up new recipes in 2 restored beach homes, the Breeze Inn and Ebb Tide, both named after fictional places in Mary Kay's novels, and both available to rent through Tybee Vacation Rentals. So if out there you want to live that Mary Kay life, you gotta rent the cottages. In between cooking, spoiling her grandkids, and plotting her next novel, Mary Kay is an intrepid treasure hunter whose favorite pastime is junking and fixing up old houses. The Newcomer is one of the 20 new books you don't want to miss this spring by Country Living, and one of Southern Living's 6 best beach reads that feel like an escape. E-News says one of the reigning queens of beach reads delivers yet another summer stunner. Yes Magazine calls it the perfect summer page turner with romance and intrigue in a small Florida beach town. And Country Living says Mary Kay Andrews is back with this perfect for poolside binge reading pick. Mary Kay, welcome, and thank you so much again for being here, and congratulations again on The Newcomer.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
We are so thrilled to have you here today. Let's start off by can you give us a little bit of info about The Newcomer and what inspired you to write it?
My editor actually, every year after the current book comes out, we usually, pre-pandemic time, meet in New York for a boozy expense account lunch.
Love it.
We talk about what I'm going to write next. And usually I have something in mind, but sometimes she has something in mind. And year before last, she said, unfortunately we had to do a Zoom. We couldn't be in New York, but she said, I want you to write something. I like the title, The Newcomer. So it would be a fish out of water story. And she said, I know you like those old mom and pop motels in Florida on the Gulf Coast, which is where I grew up in St. Pete, Florida. And so she said it should be, somebody who's a newcomer. And maybe it's a motel that has a lot of retirees that are usually staying there for a season. So that was the starting point. I knew I had a fish out of water, literally. Yep. And so Letty is short for Scarlett Carnahan. And when the book opens is pulling into, it's just dawn, and she's pulling into the parking lot of a beat up mom and pop motel called the Murmuring Surf. Mm-hmm. She's terrified. She's exhausted. She's been driving all night, and she's got a 4-year-old little girl in the back seat, Maya.
Yeah.
And Maya's been traumatized. Just a few hours earlier, a day earlier, Letty discovered her sister's lifeless body on the floor of her fancy Upper West Side townhouse. And her sister, Tanya, had kind of a troubled personality.
Yep.
And she had a very strained relationship with her ex, and a very bitter custody battle was going on. And so Tanya thought something bad would happen. And of course, Letty thinks her sister's just being a drama queen, because her sister is a drama queen. Yep. But Tanya tells her, if something bad happens to me, it's Evan.
Yep.
And you have to grab Maya and you have to go. Promise me you'll take Evan and you'll run as far away from here as you can go.
Yep.
So that's what happens. She finds her sister's body. She sees Maya standing at the top of the staircase crying. She doesn't know if her niece has seen anything or not. So she grabs Maya and her sister's go bag, because their mother always told them, you always got to be prepared.
Yep.
A man's going to get tired of you. And when he does, you got to get ready to go. So Tanya has a go bag, and it's got a big wad of cash in it.
Yep.
And a diamond ring and a faded magazine article about a motel in Florida that Letty's never heard of, called the Murmuring Surf. So that's where Letty heads. Yep. And stuff happens.
And a lot of stuff happens from there. We love it. So is that typical then of how you kind of dive into a new project? Because I mean, like 30 years, right? A new book every year. It seems, from knowing what I do of your work, like place seems very important to you, but also character, plot, like, you know, all the big components seem really so important. I'm always interested to know kind of, is there an order of operations? Does that high concept kind of happen first? Like, does, you know, okay, you said in this case, it was the newcomer and it was going to be a fish out of water story. Does that sort of frame come first usually? Or does, you know, do you say, I want to set a story in Florida at a mom and pop motel? You know, how does that typically work in general in your process? And is there a usual order of how you
know, Jenna, it's different every time. With the newcomer, my editor had an idea, a spark of an idea, and I just took it and ran with it. Last year's book, Hello Summer, I had been wanting to set a book at a small town newspaper for years. And my editor kept saying, oh, newspapers, that's a dying industry. Nobody cares anymore. But I cared. And so that book gave me a chance to set a book at a small town failing newspaper. But other times, you know, it starts with a character. When I wrote Savannah Blues, which was the first one under my pseudonym, it was the character. I knew I wanted to write a woman who's just come out of a bad divorce. I knew she would be an antique picker who loves estate sales as I do. And I knew that she would go to an estate sale and break in the night before the sale, just ostensibly to use a bathroom, but really to get a sneak peek.
Yep.
And that she would find a body. With Hissy Fit, the title came first. I literally was taking a bubble bath, and I was mad about somebody I thought had mistreated me. And I thought, well, I am just going to pitch a Hissy Fit. And as soon as I had that thought, I said out loud, okay, that's a book title. And I got out of the tub and I called my agent and I said, Stuart, I'm going to write a book called Hissy Fit.
Yep.
And he said, great, what's it about?
Yep.
And I said, I don't know. I got to get back in the tub. But it's about, you know, I write books set in the South. And so she's a small town girl who is, you know, something really outrageous happens and she pitches a Hissy Fit. And then sort of what ensues comes after that. So I wrote a book called Spring Fever.
Yep.
That book started out, I had a dream. I had a recurring dream that I was sitting in church and there was a young woman sitting in front of me. And after 2 or 3 nights of this, I wanted to know what I was doing there. So, and I have really vivid, memorable dreams. So I tapped her on the back one night in my dreams and I said, "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" And she said, "I'm watching my ex-husband get remarried." And I said, "Oh, wow, whoa. Are you okay with that?" And she said, "Yes, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
They deserve each other. He's an asshat." And when I woke up, I thought, okay, that's a book.
Yeah.
And that book, Spring Fever, starts that way.
Yep.
My character is sitting in church and she sees her ex-husband standing on the altar in his Armani tux. And she's telling herself, and she goes because she's convincing herself, I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. I'm over him. I'm starting a new life. He's starting a new life.
Yep.
But when the wedding march starts and she hears that music and she sees him standing on the altar, this tidal wave just washes over her and she realizes, I'm not over him. I want him back.
Which is, I mean, perfect starting place, right? I mean, all these things, this jumping off point, like, it seems like you definitely have a sense of the dramatic of like, where am I starting in a terrible situation, right? I mean, with the Newcomer, the warning, the go bag, the murder, we're on the road, or, the death, where, we're on the road, we're going, and we're in immediately another sticky situation. So from your perspective, do you then, once you've got general concept, are you an outliner? Are you a write and let the story unfold? Are you, do you kind of like spend a while doing research then before you start writing? What's the next phase after you've got your concept for you?
I write a synopsis, and that's really more of a marketing tool for my editor and my agent. So they know the story I intend to write. I'm not an outliner. I didn't go to Catholic school, so I never learned how to do Roman numerals.
Yeah.
I mean, I can do X. I can go 10, but anything those other, M's and C's and all that, no, I can't do those. So I write a synopsis. It's like a blueprint of the story. I know who my character is. I know what she wants. I kind of have an idea of how she thinks she could get it.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have a very vague idea of how I want the book to end.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just start writing. I usually write in a very linear way.
Okay.
That has changed somewhat in the last couple years.
Is there a reason for that, or is that just natural?
Maybe I don't know. Maybe my stories are more complicated and I have to switch things around. The first time I wrote a dual timeline book was with a High Tide Club.
Yes.
And I had never written a dual timeline book before, and it terrified me, and it still terrifies me. And I've got a little bit of that going on with the book I'm working on now for next summer. And then I had a dual timeline also with Sunset Beach.
Okay. Yep.
Which was a couple years ago, and actually is set in the same area as the Newcomer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's talk about that now. So you were born in Florida and you have, a connection to these mom and pop motel on the beach. Can you tell us a little bit, about why this location for this specific book? And then I want to talk a little bit about, how you're a Southern writer and you're, a real leading voice in Southern fiction. And I want to talk about how that region, particularly the coastal South, inspires you. So let's start with the Newcomer and Florida, specifically Gulf Coast, and tell me about your history in the area.
Well, I think maybe people are like sea turtles. We have a beach and we migrate back there whenever we can. And so those Gulf beaches are the beaches of my heart. It's where I grew up. My mother grew up on those beaches, and I still have family and friends down there. So there's definitely a tug.
Yeah.
And so I know those beaches, and I love that it's one of the only beaches left that I know of on the East Coast where there are still some remaining mom and pop motels. It's not all high-rise condos and, chain hotels and resorts and that kind of thing. There still are. I mean, when I did the research for the Newcomer, I went and talked to the owners of a couple different motels, so I could get the story right. And I think for me, every story, once I have it in my head, it tells me what the setting needs to be.
Yeah.
The Newcomer, I wanted a place where retirees and snowbirds would come down every year, and very insistent about everything stays the same. I have to be in the same unit as always.
Mhm.
And my friends from New Jersey who always come down when we come down will be there, and we'll sign up for shuffleboard at the same time. And
Love
the
shuffle.
sense of routine, the sense of regimen, that so many, when you get older, you cling to that.
Yeah.
And so
Even when you're not older.
yeah, well, that's true. So this book just told me I want to be set down there. And Treasure Island is a real little beach town.
Cool.
And I thought it was kind of a fun play on words because of some of the stuff that happens in the novel. But other books I wrote, when I wrote Hello Summer, that book wanted to be set in a fictional town on the panhandle of Florida.
Yeah.
When I wrote a book called Beach Town, and that book is set in a fictional town called Cypress Key, which is actually a very thinly disguised Cedar Key. And I wrote, I've written a couple books set on the North Carolina coast. I wrote a book called The Weekenders, which is set on an island like Bald Head Island. And then I wrote Summer Rental is set at Nag's Head. So just different, for me anyway, different stories kind of lend themselves to different settings. And then I have to go. And even if it's a fictional setting, I know kind of what it's inspired by. I go there, I hang out, I, rent a little cottage or something and dig my toes in the sand and sort of try to live that life and put my head in the world of that book.
I love that. Oh, the dream, right? To be able to kind of immerse yourself in the place as you're working.
Yeah, it only happens after you're an empty nester.
Yeah. As a mom of a baby whose writing is usually happening while said baby is like, squeaking and squealing downstairs. It's even though I am on Cape Cod where, the book I'm working on is set, it's different. It's a different thing than when, the kind of tucking away, which I want to talk about in a second, but we have a question from the audience and I see a lot of great questions coming in on the chat. So I am going to try to get to as many as I can throughout the interview and towards the end. But first from Amanda Smiley, how often do you change your mind about how you want your books to end? And did that happen with The Newcomer?
Did that happen with The Newcomer? It did a little bit. There were characters in the book who I didn't know would show up. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but I didn't know what Letty's connection was, what her sister's connection was to Treasure Island until I was about a quarter of the way in the book. And I was actually, in Publix is the big supermarket chain in the South, and especially in Florida. They're based in Florida. And I was in a Publix down in Florida near Treasure Island. And I saw something and it made me think, okay, I just, I sort of visualized a guy who looks out of place in a Publix. He's got a shopping cart. He's got, a 6-pack of beer in it, and he's hanging around the produce section. And I thought, and I could just see him. And I thought, okay, that he is there for a reason. And I didn't know what it was. And so that turns out to be sort of set off a chain reaction. I know I want to leave my characters in a good place. I have an unspoken pact with my readers. I'm going to give you a happy ending.
Yeah.
But I never know what she's going to have to go through to get to it. And Letty had to go through a lot in The Newcomer. I've written mysteries. I wrote one mystery one time that was called Irish Eyes. And I thought I knew that. And when I wrote category mysteries, when I was writing under my own name, I would sort of say, here's who the murderer is, here's who done it, and here's how she finds it. And then I would start writing in a real linear way. But this one time I was getting to the end of the book and my character Callahan is trying to draw out the killer. And so she leaves a bar. She's walking alone late at night, but she's confident she can handle things. And a car pulls up beside her and the electric window rolls down and she looks over and it's not the murderer I thought it would be. Somebody totally different who had only a very passing role in the book. He had a walk-on role in the book. And I thought, uh-oh, now what do I do? Do I go back and I get him out of that car? Or maybe my subconscious thinks this would be better. And that was the first time I really said, okay, let's see where this goes. So I think the longer I've written, the more I give myself permission to sort of see what happens and see as my characters have changed through the plot of the book. When I wrote The High Tide Club, I had a character that my protagonist was romantically involved with. And everything changed. I had a scene. I was actually staying on a barrier island off the coast of Georgia. And a friend said, who was sort of like the game warden on this island. It's owned by the state of Georgia. He said, do you want to go up in the lighthouse? And he had the key. And so I said, sure, let's, go up. And I got about halfway up this winding spiral staircase. And I sort of had a moment of vertigo and kind of clutched the walls and looked out the window. And there was this amazing panoramic view of the island and the ocean on one part. And then you could see the river that separated this island from the mainland. And all of a sudden, a scene came to my mind and it changed everything.
Wow. Well, that's where that big magic is, like of just kind of being in the right place at the right time, having your brain in the right place and going with it and knowing. And that must, coming from experience, like, when to trust your gut now, right? It sounds like.
Well, I try to sometimes, I second guess myself all the time, but I think the longer I've been doing this, the more I give myself permission to mess up and to go down the wrong, a dead end, because I know I can always back up.
Yeah.
That's why I have a delete key.
Yeah. I love that. And that speaks to your ability to continue to produce work year after year after year, giving it's the author's job to give the same thing, but totally different and just as good. And, exactly as
no,
fun.
Not good. I want it to be better.
Better. Yes. But that kind of thing, that's really tough. That's really difficult to do. And, it's so fascinating to me always, like, how have you learned to keep up the pace? Because I feel like that is it's a skill as well as a talent, and it's something that must be honed over time. How have you managed to keep up the pace, keep the ideas, keep it going?
I think it's my job. I think my self-esteem and my sense of self-worth are tied up in what I do. I'm a writer. And if I'm not writing, I'm not a writer. That's sort of how I look at it. Yeah. I don't know what else I would do. During the pandemic, I got way more disciplined because for once there was no place to go. There was nothing else to do but write. So I have a group of author friends. There are 5 of us. And we started like you all did, we started a Facebook group called Friends in Fiction. But during the pandemic, I had a deadline and I was, as I said, there's nothing else to do. So every morning I became the sheriff. I would text everybody at 7 a.m. and said, who's writing?
I love it.
We would do 7 a.m. writing sprints.
I love it.
So I usually give myself a page quota or a word quota. But so all of us were writing together and we would say, it's not going so well. I've got this character. I don't know what he's doing there. Or, I don't know why my character is doing what they're doing. So we had that. But I think I wrote every day without missing a day for like 5 months straight.
Wow. And is that typical of how you I know you said that was a little more like, is that because you also, sometimes say you go to one of your beach cottages, which again, shout out to the beach cottages that are for rent. If you want to live the Mary Kay Andrews life, do you kind of go and take like a chunk and have like a little writing retreat, or do you slowly work over the course of months? What's like a typical time frame for you for
for the past year and a half, I put my laptop beside my bed on the nightstand. Every morning when I wake up around 7, I grab it and I give myself, you have to write 500 words before anything else happens. So I sort of think, I've got to seize the day before the day seizes me, before I take care of business and do all the other stuff that I'm obligated to do. With last year during the pandemic, the Newcomer, I actually, for the first time in my career, first time ever, handed the book in 6 weeks early.
Wow.
And as I said, because usually, I blow deadlines. I've blown deadlines by like 5 months before.
I love it.
Not endear you to your publishing team.
Yep.
But last year, as I said, I was stressed. There was nothing else to do. I actually started writing a book in secret and turned in a second book. So I have a Christmas novella coming out in September.
Yes, you do.
I didn't tell my editor or my agent that I was writing it. And it was the first time in my career since I sold my first book that I was writing on spec. I just got into it and did it.
That's so great. I love to hear those stories. I could go down this process hole for a long time, but I do want to give a shout out to Friends in Fiction and talk about these wonderful women who you've actually dedicated the Newcomer to,
right.
Which I know our audience will recognize. How could you not? It's Kristen Harmel, Christy Woodson Harvey, Patty Callahan Henry, Mary Alice Monroe, and you also have your managing producer Meg Walker.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little more about how you all became friends? Obviously, you were all right in this this similar space, but in general, how did it kind of happen? This powerhouse of I love how supportive the writer community is. I come from the music industry and from the entertainment industry, the world of acting and music and things like that, and it is not the same. This is when I started in the book world about 2 years ago, I was like, wait a minute, people are nice here. What is this? How did this mega friendship form? And how do you help inspire and encourage each other?
Well, Patty and Mary Alice and I were already longtime friends, and there were a group of us. We all had books coming out spring, summer of 2020. And we were all like, what are we going to do? How are we going to promote a book when we can't go on tour? And so they were friends with Christy Woodson Harvey and Kristen Harmel. I'd never met Kristen. I had met Christy only in passing. But so I said, well, I've got a pro Zoom account. Why don't we get on a Friday happy hour? Oh, hey, Rosé, happy hour. And we'll talk about what we could do. Maybe we could do something together. And so long story short, we decided to do a Facebook group off of my author page because just coincidentally I had the biggest following, and so we started out doing it. The first show we did in first week of April 2020. I was so certain no one would watch. I was in my pajamas. My daughter was running the tech. And so she was crawling around on the floor of my office trying to, take us live. And, it was so glitchy and terrible. But we were astonished that not only did people show up, they continued to show up. So we honestly just thought it would last for 6 weeks. And then the pandemic would go away and we'd write our books and we'd go back out on tour. Yeah. And of course, to our horror.
Horror is the word you're looking for.
that didn't happen. And so it was sort of our lifeline. It was a way for us to talk about books, talk about our own books. About 5-6 weeks into it, we thought, well, let's ask authors on as our guests.
Yeah.
And our first guest was Kristen Hanna. Mm-hmm. Kristen and I have the same editor, Jen Enderlin at St. Martin's Press. And so she was very generous and came on and people loved it. So we just sort of, we learned it by doing it. And it was a steep learning curve, let me tell you.
Sounds like at the Blaze, what we've experienced. We always say, we're learning to fly the plane we're building the plane as we learn to fly it. And,
right.
And,
in the dark with our hands tied behind our back with,
yep.
Yeah.
But you know what? I mean, kudos to all of us for making things work in the, in this weird world that we're living in. And I know you're starting to get back out on the road. You're doing some live events, some socially responsible distance events, which is great. Obviously, folks, we want you to follow Mary Kay online and keep up with her in-person events.
Yeah, I'll be on Nantucket next Saturday.
Yes, you will. Nantucket Book Festival, right? Yeah.
Not the festival. The festival will be over by then, but I'm going to do a signing. It just happens my husband and I are going on vacation to New England. And so I'm going to do a signing next Saturday at 10:30 at Mitchell's on Nantucket.
Awesome. You're coming to my neck of the woods. I love it. Love it. Love it. Let's go back just for a little bit. I want to talk to you about genre. And I want to talk to you about this, your books have always kind of had that intersection of the dark and the light. We have the intersection of the thrills, the mystery, the suspense, and, comedy, romance, great locales, really interesting, funny, quirky characters. We have style and fashion and all of these things. And you seem to have achieved a great balance over the years. But I know that it was a process and it was an evolution. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you came to be the writer that you are today and the steps you took along the way in terms of finding your style and voice?
Right. Well, I started out writing mystery. I was writing in secret, and I was still working full time at the Atlanta Constitution. I had 2 young kids. Yeah. So I wrote at night, and I finished a mystery and started sending it out, submitting it to agents, and got nowhere real fast. But eventually I went to a writer's workshop where Sue Grafton was teaching mystery writing.
Right.
And in that workshop, she said something to me that I needed to know, that I already was a writer, but she said to me, "You're a writer. You're ready to be published."
Yeah.
And so not long after that, I sold my first manuscript to Harper Collins, and it was category mystery. Mm-hmm. It had a woman who was a former Atlanta police detective. She buys a cleaning business. She can't get anywhere in the police force because it's so male dominated.
Sounds familiar.
I wrote 8 of those mysteries. They were published by Harper Collins. And I had an idea for a different kind of a novel. I wanted to write about a protagonist. She wasn't a cop. She wasn't even an amateur sleuth. She's just an antique picker coming out of a bad divorce, and stuff happens to her. And I wanted to set it in Savannah, where I'd lived and worked twice. Savannah is such an evocative place. It's one of those places where the past isn't past. Yep. It whispers to you from every sidewalk in the historic district. And so when I started writing that book, I had just changed literary agents. And I told my agent that I was thinking about writing it under a pseudonym. Because I wanted to sell more books. I was really impatient. When I was writing category mystery, my sales were good. I got good reviews, but my numbers weren't growing. I was impatient. So I said, I'm going to write a book, and it's a different kind of a book, and I'm going to write it under a pseudonym. And Mary Kay Andrews is a combination of my kids' names. Yeah. And so part of that was the fact that I had a new agent, and he talked to me about, what do you want out of your career, when we first started talking. And I said, for the first time, I managed to say it out loud. I never had the courage to say it out loud before. I said, I want to be a New York Times bestseller. Yeah. I want to sell a lot of books.
Yeah.
And I was a huge fan of Susan Isaacs.
Yep.
Who wrote funny, witty, women's fiction, but there was a mystery element in them. Very, very place-oriented.
Yep.
It's Long Island. She's a Jewish woman. She's funny. She's courageous. She stands up for herself. And I just said, I sort of want to be the Southern Susan Isaacs.
Yeah.
And God bless my agents. He said, okay,
great.
Let's see how we make that. How does that happen? And I said, I told him the idea for Savannah Blues. And I said, and of course there'll be a murder. And he said, why? And I said, because I'm a mystery writer. He said, no, you're a novelist. You've been writing mysteries, but that doesn't have to be all you do. And so he kind of gave me permission to stretch my wings. At first, people called it chick lit, which is a term I just don't love. I think it's
So
derogative.
obviously we have our subversive
Okay.
twist on it. And well, it's specific. I mean, it's intentional. It's lit chick because this genre, I mean, I can't tell you how many rooms I've gone into where people malign this genre of like somehow a book featuring women and written by women is lit chick, and a book written by a man is high fiction. Like it's fascinating to me, but I'm this is not my tirade. This is yours. Let's go back to your feeling.
I just think it's derogatory and it's dismissive and it's limiting. And nobody gets to limit me anymore. So, I mean, James Patterson, they don't say James Patterson writes dick lit. So why is what I write chick lit?
We always say that behind the scenes, actually. We call it dick lit. But hey, like we should.
So, I started writing, Savannah Blues came out. They did not, HarperCollins made an intentional marketing decision not to sell it, not to label it a mystery. Mm-hmm. It is a mystery. It's got a mystery in it, but you don't care who done it. You really just care, as my editor pointed out to me, you just care about the relationship that Wheezy has. Does she end up reinventing herself? And that's kind of the running theme through all of my books. Mm-hmm. Characters, women characters, most of them, who go through some stuff and manage to reinvent themselves. And so, when I switched houses to St. Martin's Press, my editor, Jen Underlin, I was new to her, and she had a very distinct idea of what she wanted me to write. Mm-hmm. And she said, we're not going to sell you as Southern fiction. You can write books set in the South. Mm-hmm. You can write what you've been writing. We're going to sell you as best-selling fiction. Yep. And that was another thing that I think really changed my career, that somebody said to me, we're not going to limit you. You can write what you want. My books were set in the South. I've never lived outside the South, but I hope that they appeal to everybody, because I read all kinds of books. I don't just read books set in the South.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that's it's something about the genre, this, women's fiction, the genre, which is such a wide, diaspora of all encompassing things, but that regionally attuned books are, for me, really appealing. I'm somebody who's never lived in the South, and I love reading books set in the South. Mm-hmm. It's like actually one of my favorite things. And I find we're getting like a lot of Midwestern stuff now. I almost read like, where do I feel like I want to go? And I kind of pick a book, but it is, I think it's important to understand that it's not Southern fiction. Like, it's not,
you can call it. Yeah. I mean, but I think, I don't ever want to be self-limiting.
Yeah, I love that. I love your attitude about all of this. Speaking of not being limiting, I mean, your books have, and The Newcomer is no exception. They're full sensory experiences. Whenever, we read one of your books, we know we're going to get food, we're going to get style, we're going to get home decor, we're going to get fashion, we're going to get all these things, which quite frankly is a large part of the appeal for me. Like, I like books that involve these other aspects of my life. And you strike me as a person who's very creative in all of these different ways. Clearly, you're a cookbook author. You've redone multiple homes. You have a fun sense of style. Clearly, like, aesthetics are important to you, and the sort of finer things in life are sort of important. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship to style and food, and why it's so important to make it such an integral element of your work?
I think my books they're all different, but they all have my DNA. Yeah. And part of my DNA is I come from a long line of good cooks, Southern and Midwestern cooks. I love old things. I love antiques. I love dead people stuff. I think antiques have stories. Yeah. They have stories about somebody else's past. And if I don't know it, I'll just make it up.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of part of reinventing yourself is reinventing your surrounding. I'm a nester by nature. And my former editor used to call what I was writing decorator porn.
That's why we read it, right? It's the same reason we pick up coastal living or Southern living, or it's
I wouldn't write like this if it wasn't something that was I cared about and that I think my readers care about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's do you have any plans for any more cookbooks or any other kind of fun offshoot projects? Any sort of yes, there's the Beach House for Rent link. You're gonna get a lot of people.
We just did a third house this past spring. Yeah. Right. Right in the middle of COVID, we found another old house on Tybee Island. We closed on it right before Christmas, and we spent this past winter and spring fixing it up. It's called Coquina Cottage, and the name, it comes from the cottage in Sunset Beach. So all the houses, the Breeze Inn and Ebb Tide, the first two houses. Breeze Inn is named after a fictional motel in Savannah Breeze, and Ebb Tide is named after a beach house in Summer Rental. And Coquina, the newest one, is named after the house in the beach cottage in Sunset Beach. So, I'm still cooking. The cookbook came about, I have to admit. I turned in the High Tide Club, and I was so late with that. I turned it in like 5 months late, and it nearly killed me. I was just exhausted because it was a whole different kind of book for me to work on.
Yep.
And I loved it, and I'm proud of that book, but it really took it out of me. And when I turned it in, I said, I had a contract to write another novel. And I said, y'all, I just need a break. But I couldn't not write a book. That's just not
a break, but not a break.
Well, yeah. I said, well, how about a cookbook? I'd been thinking about a cookbook. Fans had asked me for a cookbook, and I had some ideas and some recipes that I'd been working on. And so that's how the Beach House Cookbook came to be. Right now, I'm working on next summer's book. I've got the Santa suit comes out at the end of September. In the meantime, I got to finish next summer's book. So
Can you give us a little hint of what next summer's book is?
Yeah, next summer's book is set in Savannah and on Tybee Island. And it's about a woman. She works in her father-in-law's contracting business. And she gets cast in a television reality show about fixing up old houses. And of course, they find a body.
Of course, there's a body. Of course,
as one does.
I love it. You're so dark. It's great. I'm going to do a couple more questions from the audience. I'm going to go back because people had some great questions at the beginning of the broadcast, and I just want to make sure we get to a couple and then get you out of here and back to work. We got to get that next book out. From Sharon Carlson Person, did you base any of the regulars at the hotel in the Newcomer on real people? And one of the great things about your books is the cast of characters and all of these interesting people. Were any of them in the Newcomer based on real people?
Not really. They were based on types. Growing up in St. Pete, when I was growing up there, it was a much different place than it is now. St. Pete is happening and vibrant and young and hip. When I was growing up, we called it the home of the newlywed and the nearly dead.
Yeah.
Because it was where people retired. They went to die. And so I knew those characters. I knew those old people who would go to a restaurant for the early bird special at 5:00 and steal sugar packets to take back to their rooms. And I knew cranky old ladies on walkers, and I knew people who would get in a fist fight over, it's my turn to do such and such. And actually, as I said, I did do research. So I went and talked to the owners, some people who'd grown up in the motel business in their family-owned motel. Yeah. And so they talked to me some about that kind of stuff. So some of it was research, and then some of it was just, processing what I'd grown up with my whole life.
You must have heard some good stories from the motel. I always feel like a hotel or a motel, like anything like that, is just such a great setting for a book because they're so wild. Wild people come through the doors.
Yeah. I'll tell you one story. A motel owner told me that he hated, he liked his regulars because they were quiet.
Yep.
They always paid. They paid ahead of time. And he didn't like people who were Airbnb people who booked online for one night.
Yep.
And he said, they come in here and they do their drugs and they have dogs. He hated people with dogs. They rip up the motel and then they leave. He just had no, they steal things. And I said, well, he said, all the motel owners on the beach, we have kind of an informal you know, we have an informal community. We tell each other what's going on. And I said, oh, do you have like like, do you say to, hey, so-and-so, if you see somebody come up in a black Chevy, don't rent to them because they're, you know, a menace? He said, yeah, kind of. I said, oh, so a DNR list? He said, yeah, something like that. Do not rent.
Yep.
Then I was talking to people at another motel, and the owner was saying, you know, we have people who've been coming down here for 30 and 40 years, and some of them are in their 80s and some of them are in their 90s. And they're very particular. They always want the same room. They want the same view.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, so do you have a DNR list? And he kind of laughed, and she said, how'd you know that? And I said, somebody, I don't know. And she said, DNR, do not resuscitate, right? Because we have guests.
Oh,
they tell us if I don't answer the door, call my kids back up in, Cape Cod because I'm dead.
And that's why there's always a body, folks. It'd be the least interesting. Someday you'll have to write the least interesting Mary Kay Andrews novel where it's just like somebody just dies because they're old, and like that's it. End of book. But we get a lot of pretty descriptions of the motel on the beach too.
Right.
And another question, Anissa Joy Armstrong says, who has been your favorite character to write? And we can either do this with the newcomer or with your entire oeuvre, and who's been the hardest to write?
The hardest to write, I had a character in Summer Rental, and she was an outsider, and I can't think of her name right now. She was not one of the group of women who had grown up together.
Yep.
She's an outsider. She's got secrets. She's not friendly. She doesn't mix with other women. She's there because she's got some stuff going on in her life. And I had the worst time figuring out who she was and why she couldn't be friends with women. She was a tough one to write. My favorite probably has been Wheezy Foley, who is the protagonist of the 4 Savannah books, Savannah Blues, Savannah Breeze, Blue Christmas, and Christmas Bliss. Wheezy's just fun to write.
Yeah, I love it. And it seems significant that she marked that turning point for you. Like, I don't know if there's some element of that to it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Before we let you go, couple quick ones. Do you ever have the urge to give readers something completely different, like totally out there? And like, if you did, what would it be?
Well, I have an idea. Last summer, I was bidding on some vintage yard furniture, garden furniture. And after the auction ended and I picked up my pieces, I got an email about the auction results, what pieces. And they had a painting at this auction house that sold for a record for this Atlanta auction house. And it was a portrait. It was probably from the 1920s, this beautiful woman. And something about that portrait just struck me, just grabbed me. So I did a little research and I found out who she was. She's a woman she was a very wealthy woman.
Cool.
And so I'm kind of toying with the idea of, is that historic fiction? How do I make it? What would I do with that? I haven't even mentioned it to my editor, who probably not. I don't know what she'd say about it, but
heard it here, folks.
Yeah. It's been bothering me. I always say my brain is like a lint trap. I never, every once in a while I go clean it out and go, oh, look at this. This must be something I'm interested in.
Do you keep lists? Are you a list person? Like, I have a master document with all the ideas that and sometimes it's just like spaghetti. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, it's like spaghetti fort. And I'm like, but I'm like, oh, I better write that down in case that's something. I don't.
I have notebooks and then I lose track of them and I lose them. But I know that if an idea sticks with me, if it's sort of tickling and teasing my imagination, that maybe there's something there.
I love that. A question from Amanda, which is always a question I ask, but based on your experience, and I'm gonna add to her question, but what advice do you have for writers and creators? And I'm going to kind of twist that a little bit to be either what's the best advice you've ever gotten, or what's the best thing you've ever learned about writing, and what's the worst advice or like thing that you were like, you know what, that's wrong.
I don't know.
For you.
Oh,
if there's one?
I think the worst advice anybody I've ever seen or read was, it is always from a man who says, if you don't write every day, 7 hours, I immerse myself in my work 7, 8 hours. I stop only for lunch and then I stop at dinner when a woman,
Has made
brings
dinner and maybe lunch
or a martini or whatever. And if you don't do that, you'll never be a writer. The best advice that I have for writers is to just put your butt in the chair and give up the idea of being perfect, because it's not ever going to happen. And put your fingers on a keyboard and start working. And I don't ever strive to be perfect. I just strive to put it down on the paper. And what I always say is, and it's a lot of other writers have said this too, but you can't fix what you ain't wrote.
That's true. That's true.
Just write it. Write it. Don't stop and keep backing up. Writers we're consumed with self-doubt and self-loathing. And we know all the tricks to derail ourselves. And so my thing is, maybe it's horrible, but just write it and don't keep backing up and revising. Beginning writers are big on revision. Yeah. You revise so much by the end of the day or the end of the month or the week or whatever. All you have is a piece of paper that has, erase marks. So give yourself permission to keep writing, go all the way to the end. Then you can back up. Then you can fix the stuff that sucks. I tell writers, really, you'll never finish your project if you don't have an idea where you're going. Yeah. So have at least some notion of what happens at the end, because if you don't do that, you'll put in all these hours and months of work. You'll get stuck in the middle, the dreaded saggy middle.
Yeah.
And then you'll give it up.
Yep.
But if you have a roadmap, just real basic sketchy roadmap, you have an idea of where you're going. So you have an idea, okay, in this book, my character is going to end up, running a restaurant with her husband that she thought she was going to ditch. If you know that vaguely, things can change along the way, but what you're working toward.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, you're just a delight. You are so lovely and warm and so much fun. And there's no surprise there, because your books are so wonderful and have given so much enjoyment and joy to countless readers over the years. Our last question of the day: what do you hope that people take away from The Newcomer and from your work in general?
I want them to. I always want to write a big, juicy book. I want them to turn the last page and sigh and already miss those characters.
Yeah.
I can't change the world. I can't make people get vaccinated. Yay, vaccinated. All I can do is promise you going to have a good time.
Yeah. I love that. And I really do. This is why I love these books. Joy is not to be discounted, especially after, the time we have all had. Thank you so much, Mary Kay. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Please go and pick up The Newcomer. Mary Kay, do you want to give a shout out to an independent bookseller or?
So many. We have so many in Atlanta. We've got Foxtail out in Woodstock. We've got Eagle Eye in Decatur, which is right near where I live. We have a new bookstore called Virginia Highland Books.
Yep.
We've got a great children's bookstore in downtown Decatur, Little Shop of Stories. So many good ones. Yeah, so many good ones.
And are there signed copies anywhere? Can people get book plates or?
Yes, they can. And they can pre-order the Santa Suit, which will be out September 28th.
Please pre-order the Santa Suit. I can't wait to see what your Christmas book is going to be. I love a Christmas book. Let's roll onwards and upwards. I can't wait to see what's next from you. Mary Kay, thank you. Congratulations. Happy 30th anniversary of authorship. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And please support your independent bookstores out there. Absolutely. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week on A Mighty Blaze.